Crying in baseball, but there's sure been a lot of arguing about moving the Atlanta Braves home stadium to Cobb County. We'll hear from both sides of an expensive venture.
Also tonight, he's been lighting up Atlanta's live theater scene for decades. Now, Kenny Leon has not one, but two shows that are the talk of Broadway. We're on the story. Welcome to On the Story. I'm Bill Nigut.
And I'm Bobbie Battista. In the news briefly tonight in Georgia, more than 40% of the year 2030. That's how much the Obama administration wants to cut carbon emissions here and in other states. This is a picture of Plant Shear near Macon. Georgia Power and Governor Nathan Deal's office both say they're studying the proposal. Senator Saxby Chambliss warns the EPA's plan will cost jobs.
Speaking of Saxby Chambliss, he's speaking out about the release of Sergeant Bowie Bergdahl after being held for 5 years by Taliban forces. Although Chambliss expresses pleasure that Bergdahl is coming home, he is not pleased that the United States negotiated with terrorists, violating long-standing policy. In Chambliss's words, quote, "I am deeply troubled by the Obama administration's not only breaking policy, but they also did so without the notification or consent of Congress as required by law."
A congressman from Georgia thinks private hospitals should step in to fix the problems with the VA healthcare system. U.S. Representative David Scott told us that would solve two problems at once.
We are going to have private partnerships with private hospitals that will do two things. Number one, it will respond immediately and help our veterans who are very, very, very sick. And the second thing, it will give us an opportunity to get in there with the Justice Department and the FBI and do the criminal investigation that has to be done.
The idea of allowing veterans to use private hospitals is gaining traction among lawmakers in both parties. You can see Congressman Scott's complete interview tomorrow night on OTS. All right, on to the big story. Everybody knows that the Atlanta Braves are pulling up stakes, moving from downtown Atlanta, which has been their home since Ted Turner bought them in 1976, and relocating to Cobb County in time for the 2017 session.
Well, a lot of people don't really know is how it all happened, which is exactly what Braves President John Sherhold said he wanted to happen. A couple of weeks ago, he told the Atlanta Press Club that secrecy was essential to getting the deal done.
And we were able to maintain our operational silence. It didn't leak out. If it had leaked out, we believe this deal would not have been done. Remarkably, we got it done. We are a great regional franchise. We draw people to Braves games at great record numbers. They come in, they're going to continue to come to Atlanta. They're going to continue to stay in hotels in Atlanta, as well as they will stay in new hotels that will come sprouting out in Cobb County. They will utilize your businesses and they will go to restaurants and go to entertainment. They'll continue to do the things they often do when they come to Atlanta. They're just going to be 12.5 miles up the road to see a baseball game.
Well, some Cobb residents and business owners say play ball. They're looking forward to being the new home of the Braves. Our Grace Olson did some pulse checking.
The construction continues. Tractors and trucks grind away right off Interstate 75 in Cobb County, clearing the way for the future home of the Braves.
I think the location's going to be great. We are looking forward to having them here. We're not too much worried about the traffic situation.
The Braves are moving a little bit closer to their fan base. You're trying to get a kind of a big city feel out here in Cobb, so where people can get to the game easier.
Good move or bad? The opinions seem to be mixed.
Management was excited about the Braves being here across the street. I think that may have been before they saw what the traffic was going to potentially look like. It will probably cause us to work from home.
It will take away from our home with our kids. There are times I have to get off early enough to be there to support them, and that's going to be one of the issues that I know I'm going to run into.
You're going to put a busy baseball stadium right at a major interstate junction, 285 and 75. It's going to be a traffic jam. I'm working at a restaurant at the Cobb Galleria, which is close by, so it's going to be an influx in customers. There are some negatives and there are some positives, so it's just going to take time to weigh out both of them, I guess.
Grace Olson, GPB News.
A lot of excitement still. Some Cobb residents say they want a timeout. They're worried about the financial repercussions of the new stadium, not to mention the traffic implications. So let's look at some of the numbers. According to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the total cash outlay for Cobb County is $392 million. That's $368 million in bonds plus $14 million from a transportation sales tax plus $10 million in contributions from local businesses. The Braves have said they'll pitch in $230 million up front. They may add another $50 million at the discretion of the Braves' home office, plus additional revenues for rent and some parking fees.
And now complicating the whole picture, the Cobb County Commission limited debate last Tuesday and even had police escort some dissenters from the meeting before voting to approve the stadium deal. So let's get to our guests. James Strawn is part of a group that opposes the new stadium. Brooks Mathis with the Cobb County Chamber of Commerce is, of course, a supporter. Welcome, guys. Thank you very much for coming in. James, let me start with you. Commission Chair Tim Lee said over the weekend that he felt like he'd heard plenty of opposition in the last 6 or 7 months, so he didn't feel obligated to listen to dissenters at the meeting last week. How did you feel about that, and what would you have said if given the chance?
Well, if I'd had the opportunity, and I've been engaged since the November 11 meeting, and I can tell you that I personally was closed out of more than one meeting, basically by stacking by the Braves boosters or those supporters of the Braves. So, and certainly what happened last Tuesday night was completely unacceptable in terms of process for me. You know, I arrived 2 hours early, and by the time I arrived, is my understanding there had been people on the floor there since 1:30. So I got in line, number 15 in line, with no hope of ever having.
Let's just say very briefly, for those people who haven't followed it closely, there were 12 slots provided for people to make public comment at this meeting, which was a crucial meeting for the final decision making by the commission. All 12 ended up going to people who supported the deal, who presumably got in line before anybody who opposed it did, and when opponents came, you were shut out. Is that right?
That's correct, and long and the short of it.
So what would you have said, given the chance?
Well, Commission Chair Lee had the opportunity to extend the speaking opportunities to another 12 or for another period of time. They could have even extended it to a following day had they chosen to do that. So I don't see that it did the Commission any service to shut out those voices that are in opposition.
But what's your concern here? What's the bottom line on your concern?
Well, the primary concern is economic. Number one, we looked at some numbers a few minutes ago, and those are part of the numbers. We also have $1 billion in transportation spending that's going to be on the I-75 corridor, 20 miles. And let me tell you, compared to what it cost to make the whole interstate commerce or interstate system, extraordinarily high cost. I'm not certain why it's so high. But that $1 billion plus another $500 million that is slotted for the US 41 improvements. So it's not like this is just the 360 or 70 million.
Brooks, this is obviously a very glamorous deal for Cobb County. If I'm with the Chamber of Commerce, I'd be pretty excited about it.
Sure, we're very excited.
But when you look at the numbers, do you have any concerns about the way this is put together and whether Cobb residents can afford to make this happen?
You know, I think we're very confident and very comfortable in the numbers. The transit numbers he just mentioned were separate from the deal. Those have been long-standing, been on the books, the 41 improvements and the managed lanes along 75. So those are great proactive things the county and the state had already put forth effort towards before this project came along. You know, and a lot of the numbers that we have, by 2018, we'll have generated $13 million worth of taxes on that property, where currently it generates about $307,000 in taxes. So we think over time, and that again is just 2018. So you know, if you look at the 30-year commitment, it should be quite large.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what are your figures on the number of jobs that this could bring to Cobb County? Because that's been highly disputed as well.
Sure. You know, we're looking at in excess of 4,000 jobs. Some of those part-time, full-time. Some of those will vary with the office space that is created in the mixed-use development. Some will work in the stadium and the retail shops.
Would a bunch of those, though, be jobs that transfer from the old stadium to the new stadium? So can you really count them?
I think they will take into account some of those jobs will transfer, but some of the folks who do work at the stadium now that that live near the stadium may not take advantage of the opportunity to make that move.
So let me go at this final meeting last week again in a slightly different way. There are a lot of people who have watched this process unfold who really don't know what to make of the numbers involved here. And I think there are a lot of people who are a little uncertain, and we'll see how it all plays out. Sure. But from everything I heard this past week, the way in which that final commission meeting to make this vote was handled has raised the ire and the concerns of an awful lot of people out there who really don't have a stake in this one way or the other, but saw this as an example of closed government and felt it wasn't a very fair process. Are you comfortable the way that played out, Brooks? It wasn't your choice.
Sure, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the commissioners or the chairman. I know that that was protocol and rules were followed, and whatever decisions they made to allow or not allow folks to speak, I'll leave to their judgment. But I do know that they have been following, all of the procedures closely throughout, this whole process since November.
James, I'm guessing you might
let me dispute that. Number one, yes, it is certainly the case that they have been following a very closely controlled process. Whether that serves the people of Cobb County, the taxpayers of Cobb County, I highly doubt, because if you look at all the economic literature. All the economic literature says that out of 120 of these types of stadiums that have been put in place through 2010, only a handful have delivered on the economic promise that they were supposed to deliver on. And what particularly concerns me here is I looked at the economic analysis that was provided by the chamber, and I'm assuming that formed a good part of what the commissioners looked at, and the numbers were simply wrong. They were so out of date. One of them dealt with the stadium in Baltimore, and that was from 1992. Well, let me tell you, there was an article in Bloomberg in 2013, November 25, 2013, where they showed 16,000 commercial properties around the Camden Yards were vacant. And it's been an abysmal failure. So,
what is your exposure, your liability as a resident of Cobb County in all of this? Do you know what your tax bill is going to look like?
Yeah.
Well, if I take the commission at their word, it should have little impact beyond the $26. I think is what they were proposing. That would be carried over from the green space bond, so we would have to continue that payment. But then they say this is going to be a self-funding, and then they use terminology that really confused me, because a self-funding general obligation revenue bond. Well, I'm not, I'm not muni bonds, but those are two different things. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's my understanding that the revenue bonds will deliver enough money to cover the cost of the stadium going cost. But
let me ask both of you that statement made earlier by John Shareholds that they truly did not believe this deal would go through if it went public first.
Sure.
Do you think that's true?
I do think that's true, and the reason I think that is true, and if anybody in economic development, and you don't have to be in Cobb County or in Georgia to know this, and you can ask any city or state person who does this type of work, a lot of companies have that same type of mentality when they're thinking of relocating their business. We work with companies like that all the time, and a lot of the economic development projects that we do work, we operate in the same way. And a lot of people may misconstrue that for secrecy, but if you think about making a business decision and needing to keep it tight,
I get that from the Braves' point of view, but on the other side of that coin is almost $400 million worth of taxpayer money, which means you don't quite have that privilege.
Sure, and again, we dealt with this like any economic development project. We had someone coming to us, and again, it did come out and people were able to speak about it, but whether it's a 200-person corporate headquarters relocating, we take it seriously to keep things confidential because it affects, obviously the people who work for these companies, real estate prices. If this, if it gets out, could kill a deal. If people start, competing on price per acre and things like that. So we try to take care confidentially with the prospect that comes to us in any project.
So let's, Brooks, give you an opportunity. Paint the picture for us of the future of that part of Cobb County. What's it going to look like? Why is Cobb going to love this? Why is all of Metro Atlanta going to love this? This is your chance to tell us about the future.
I think it's going to create the sense of place that not only some of the residents have wanted, but a lot of our businesses in that area to help recruit and retain young talent, to really give us an energy in that part of the county. It is the epicenter of where our businesses are. We've got a lot of employees there, but also an entertainment district. You've got a wonderful convention center, Cobb Energy Performing Arts Center, home of the Atlanta Ballet, the Atlanta Opera, soon to be the Atlanta Braves over there. And so we're excited about all of that with the Chattahoochee recreation area as well. So we really think it'll be a destination for people to come and visit, but also after you get off work, and if you work in that area, you're able to stay and spend time and live, work, play.
We should say, though, that the mixed-use development, the entertainment district, the housing that has lent to the excitement that many people have about this, this is not a firm deal at this point, right? This is just a spoken agreement that this is going to happen,
yes,
right?
Yes, it's a spoken agreement. The Braves have yet to commit in writing to that. And in fact, there again, Mr. Sherholtz, I think, was pretty clear about that. He said he was not Nostradamus. Indeed, he's not Nostradamus. And so I have, I personally have concerns. Will that ever come to fruition? Because without that commitment. So.
And I have to say, they've spent $70 million on that part of the property, moving pipelines, zoning, grading. So to spend that type of money and already be moving infrastructure for that and for that not to take place is, I think we can be very confident that mixed use will take place.
I think a lot of people are just sort of curious about logistics, like where are you going to park?
Sure.
How do you get from the parking lots to the stadium? And what about the traffic at one of the busiest interstate intersections in the country?
And those are valid concerns, and I think everybody, whether you are a resident or a business person that works there, that's something that you need to look at, and that I think Chairman Lee and the commissioners and Cobb DOT and Georgia DOT take seriously.
We're out of time. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we really have to get up. But thank you both very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. On The Story continues in just a moment. We check in with longtime Atlanta resident and stage director Kenny Leon.
Kenny's taken his act to New York City, where he's about to open tonight a second show on Broadway. We're back with more in a minute.
Take a sentimental journey back in time. It's the greatest music from the big band years.
Don't sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me. Anyone else but me. Anyone else but me. No, no, no. I am Mr. Jackson. Everything's okay.
Tonight at 7:30 on GPB.
What a girl.
His message was simple.
I like you just the way you are.
But the impact of Fred Rogers reached beyond his iconic television show.
When you've been with him, the world looks a little different.
He assumed that everyone watching him had inside themselves this wonderful person.
It's a moving and personal account of how Mr. Rogers changed the way we look at the world.
I don't know if we'll ever see his kind again.
Mr. Rogers and Me.
Tonight at 7:30 on GPB.
You may
have seen pelicans at the beach, but you've never seen them like this.
Want more GPB? Check out exclusive content in our digital magazine. Come behind the scenes with us as we introduce you to the people and programs of GPB. Plus, you'll learn about cool things to do across the state and meet other interesting Georgians.
I'm Joshua Stewart, host of Morning Edition on GPB Radio.
From getting healthy to getting a new hobby, you'll find it in your GPB digital magazine, available free from iTunes.
Welcome back to On the Story. Tonight is a big night for Georgia on Broadway. The musical Holler If You Hear Me, based on the music of rapper Tupac Shakur, opens in previews at the Palace Theater.
Holler is the latest Broadway vehicle directed by Kenny Leon, who makes his home and established his theater credentials as artistic director of the Alliance Theater right here in Atlanta. This is Kenny's second Broadway show just this season. He's been nominated for a Tony for Best Director of Raisin in the Sun, starring Denzel Washington, which is still running in New York. I sat down with Kenny recently to talk to him about Holler and his work in New York theater.
Look, y'all understand this. I get around. I get around.
In a rehearsal hall on West 89th Street in New York, Kenny Leon and cast are giving invited members of the media a first look at Holler If You Hear Me.
On my block, it never fails to be gunshots. Can't explain a mother's pain when the sun drops. Like mail slipping in hell, when will we prevail? Fear in jail, but crack sales got me living well.
And I can help but wonder why so many young kids had to die. Caught strings from AKs in the drive-by. Swollen pride and homicide don't coincide. Brothers cry for broken lives.
All right, man. All right. We caught up with Leon in Atlanta a few days later.
Hey, man, how you been? I'm good, man.
He'd come here to host his annual charity golf tournament, which benefits True Colors, the theater he founded here some 10 years ago.
Everyone hits from the tee. We take the best ball. Everyone hits from that ball. And then you play your own ball in.
Leon has little time for golf these days. He went without a break from opening a Broadway revival of Raisin in the Sun, for which he has received a Best Director Tony nomination, to rehearsals for Holler. What is Holler If You Hear Me?
Holler If You Hear Me is this wonderful new Broadway musical that Todd Kreitler wrote, and I've never seen anything like it, but it's inspired using the lyrics of Tupac Shakur, who is an amazing artist, was an amazing artist, and what I've tried to do is to reveal to the world the artist that is Tupac. Not interested in the day-to-day life of Tupac. We're not developing an autobiographical story. It's all just using his lyrics and putting it with Todd Kreitler's book to give voice to young boys, young men in America who are being shot, killed daily. It's also a musical that talks about unconditional love of family, community, and country.
Why that song as the title of the show?
Well, the title of the show, Holler If You Hear Me, which is one of his songs, one of Tupac's songs. But I think Todd chose as the title because there are a lot of Americans hollering every day to be heard about economics, education, dreams deferred, access to the dream, to the American dream. And what is most interesting about Holler If You Hear Me as a title is the hear me part. We look at the holler part, and in fact, if you look at the New York Times and when it lists the play, it's listed as holler. But really, we're more interested in the hear me. And if most people who are different from each other, if most Americans just took the time to just listen and hear each other and respect each other, then we could learn and grow from that.
Bless! Much love to my brothers in the pen. See you when I free you, if not when they shove me in. Once again, it's an all-out spot. Keep your hands on your cat and your boys. Watch your back. As if they catch you in the alley. I tell ya, mess with the best, and the best couldn't help you up. Scream! Feel me? See it clearly? Holler if you hear me.
You've become, in many ways, the leading director of African-American theater on Broadway. But is it correct to assume that the way you direct you believe that what you're really doing is telling universal stories, not just stories about the black experience.
Yeah, on Broadway, I don't look at my work as African American specific. In fact, I just think I'm a director who's trying to, you know, apply my life learning to the specifics of the story I'm telling. Now, my hope is not that the color will dissolve. My hope is that the ideas attached to color and race will dissolve.
Every musical has those warm, wonderful ballads, and if you get some people that can deliver it, so we have a love story in the midst of our musicals.
You will always be in my heart with unconditional love.
Come and listen to my truest thoughts, my truest feelings. Most of my peers losing years beyond this drug dealing. How many caskets can we witness before we see it's hard to live this life without God? So we must ask forgiveness.
We must remember that tomorrow comes after the dark. So you will always be in my heart with unconditional love.
How does having come out of Atlanta, how does having been in Georgia for so many years inform your work?
That's a good question, Bill. It informs my work in every way because I think until you lived in the South, you don't know the true America with all of our warts, with all of our rainbows, the good and the bad. Since I was a little boy growing up in Florida and then coming to school in Georgia, I've always been aware of the inequalities, the racism, sexism, but I've always also seen the beautiful in the churches. And one reason I like Atlanta because it's a big city, but it's a small town. But I think growing up in the South, you're encouraged to educate yourself about our history, and history has played a big part in all of the plays that I've done.
Leon insists he's not overly anxious about whether he wins the Tony next week.
It's interesting to be nominated for the Best Director Tony for the second time, but the most important thing to me is that the whole production gets that win, you know.
But for tonight, all of Broadway's luminaries will be at the Palace Theater to watch Leon's show, hollering that it's arrived and brought fresh voices with it.
I love it when they feel me. How if you hear me?
Holler if you hear me. Holler's going to have a very short preview period for a Broadway show. Its official opening night is just 2 weeks away on June 19th. Tony Award ceremony takes place this coming Sunday evening, June 8th.
And that'll do it for tonight. Good night.
Good night.
This is a GPB original production.